Dean Bowie is CEO of GreenBlue Urban. The company was founded in 1992 to research and provide solutions for assisting trees in urban spaces with the goal of improving planting success and increasing leaf canopy in cities. So Dean, can you start by telling me how you came to set up the company?
Yeah, sure. The beginnings were pretty humble, really. I was involved in a number of different tree planting projects back in the late 1980s, early 90s, where we were planting trees into a lot of different scenarios. And one thing I noticed was that the trees in urban spaces really struggled. The ones, particularly when they're planted in paved surrounds, had a number of different challenges to overcome just to stay alive, let alone grow and thrive and become what they needed to be in our urban environment. So I guess the business sort of flowed out of that. The idea for the business was to create products to rebalance things in favor of the tree, if you like. So I think the first thing we noticed was that drought or lack of watering was killing a lot of trees in those first 2 or 3 critical years. So that's where it started. We designed a very simple product to help busy contractors water trees fast. But of course, once we got to that stage, we then started to learn a bit more about the industry, and it helped form the way the company set up, because we started to help trees to make that first establishment step and get their roots down. And then we had pushback from local authorities and people saying, well, it's okay getting trees to live, but they're causing problems around them. They're pushing paving up, they're tripping people up. We're moving away from planting trees in streets. And I began to think far more deeply about this whole concept, because trees without streets, they're not great places to be, are they? The trees are providing all the shade and the ecosystem benefits that we need. If we're going to pull back from planting, something is fundamentally wrong. So if you like, that entered into the DNA of the business early on. How can we develop products which will help trees and balance the needs of the tree with the needs of the urban environment? Because if you just plant trees and let them do what they will, you will have paving problems, you will have challenges, and that gives you pushback. So the business really progressed on that, and it became very clear that back in 1992, there was no company that was dedicated specifically to looking at urban trees. There were many companies doing proprietary tree products, woodland planting, parkland planting, but we devoted this company to look at how we can help urban trees be planted in urban areas successfully and without causing problems. Massive challenge. And I think one of the fundamental things I had to understand back then was we're taking a woodland plant. It's essentially a living thing, and trees are they're said to be the largest living things on the planet, and they can live for the longest. And we're trying to put them into an environment which is diametrically opposed to where it would like to be. So that's, if you like, how the company started.
So it's not just sticking a tree into a hole in the ground anymore.
No, correct. I mean, you can do that. And of course, it's a relatively cheap way of planting a tree, but the ultimate result is very rarely what you want it to be. The tree will struggle. And when it begins to, if it can survive, often it's to the detriment of the paved surround as the roots are fighting for space. And I think when we're putting trees into urban environments, the moment we forget where a tree is happiest and where it's at home, the forest, the woodland environment, the moment we forget that is the moment we tend to make mistakes when we bring them into urban areas.
So each mayor of London says he's going to plant lots of trees. Boris planted 10,000 street trees. City Hall at the moment say they've planted 250,000 trees since 2016. Do you think that's enough for London? And what more would you like to see done?
Well, I think, Peter, it's all good stuff, isn't it? Getting the numbers of trees. It's relatively simple to say, and I'm not in any sense decrying that. I think it's great. It's great for local authorities and governments to have aspirations to plant trees, but often the numbers are good, but they don't really tell the whole story, because you might say, well, what is happening to those trees after they're planted? And often when you see the budget that's allocated against the numbers, you think, well, they must be all parkland trees, or a very large proportion, because it's not adequate to plant trees in streets with that kind of budget often. That being said, we have worked on a number of really good schemes where we've worked with a limited budget to get trees in and give them the best possible chances that they have. So is it enough for London? No, it's a great thing to do, and it's very important we do have those targets. But when they're measured against things like canopy volume, that is a more meaningful metric. So we need to look at it very closely. You know, how many of those trees that we planted, the 10,000 you mentioned, you know, how many of them are still alive today? How many of them are thriving? And that there's only so much, I suppose, the government can do as well. Local authorities. You've also got the developers and the people that are building these big infrastructure projects. And I would like to see, what I'd like to see, Peter, is a longer term view of investment in green infrastructure. Some are, and it's really amazing. Some companies are committing themselves saying, look, no, we see trees as a 50 to 100-year investment. And it's those kind of bodies that are aware of the value that mature tree canopy brings in an urban space, because a large tree will bring 60 times the ecosystem benefit of a lollipop tree. You'll know what I mean by a lollipop tree. These little trees, which actually they're a part of nature in London, but there's lots and lots of very small trees. But it's the larger ones that bring us the ecosystem benefit. They intercept storm water, they provide shade, they provide urban cooling, they give a sense of place, they help deal with air pollution, multiple ecosystem benefits, but they tend to come from bigger trees. And that's why we tend to emphasize canopy volume is more important actually than sheer numbers of trees. And I mean, developers often mean well. I was quite interested. I looked at one of the NLQ journals and I turned to the back and you've got a project directory there, haven't you? Which is really interesting to look through. It gives me a bit of a tab on what's happening. But I had a quick count, and out of 236 pictures or graphics of projects, 156 of the ones I kept had a tree in them. That's something like 2/3 of those projects had a tree or a part of a tree or a bit of green infrastructure in there. And that to me says the aspiration's there, and that's great. The practicality is how do we get those in? And we've been involved in a number of really interesting projects. One comes to mind, it's called King's Crescent, that's in Stoke Newington. And it's a really good example of how developers can do more and bring trees in through planning it at an earlier stage, allocating space, thinking about routes where they're going to go, how those trees can become truly multifunctional in a congested urban environment. I think that's a really interesting one of how, if you get in early with the design process of projects, you're so much more successful in getting those trees in so that they can benefit the communities where they are. Another one, which I think is an interesting one, because many people, we get a lot of pushback, as you can imagine, in London because the below ground environment is so congested. You've got your gas, your water, electricity, cables, all sorts of multiple utilities underground. And we do get a lot of pushback for that. But another project I sometimes point to as an example of what can be achieved is Selfridges. Now, Selfridges obviously is a store located in probably one of the most congested parts of the capital. And we planted 4 amazing liquid amber trees outside the new side entrance to Selfridges. And they're magnificent. Now, if we can achieve that there, we can probably achieve it most other places in London. And it was very interesting because it came from the top in that company that they wanted those trees to live. There was the will to make it happen. And to me, that really shows the true green credentials of a company, be it a developer, be it a corporation, or so on. You can tell whether they really care about the environment when you drill down into the detail of how they're incorporating trees. So rather than just put trees in a pot above ground outside the entrance, they've built them into the ground. They've got longer term trees. I often think trees in a pot, they're a little bit of a symptom of using trees as a cosmetic to try and show that we look like we're environmentally friendly. But the reality is we didn't want to go to that extra effort of making putting those trees in such a way that they can get to maturity. And I feel, Peter, I don't know what you feel, but I think we owe it to the next generation to plant trees properly, because London is a wonderful city, and the trees in London are an incredible feature. People come from a long way around and admire the trees that there are in London. That's a tremendous legacy. And in many cases, it's a result of the Victorians' far-reaching, far-sighted policies of allocating enough space and enough investment to get trees into urban areas. I don't know, that's a bit of a long, rambling answer to your question. Can we do more? I think we can do more. Should we do more? Yes, undoubtedly, I would say.
Well, I think somewhere else we could do more, because often associated with planting, you can put in sustainable urban drainage, and you're experts in that. So do you think new developments are doing enough to integrate SUDs into their schemes? And how do we actually get more projects into our streets, which is a slightly different matter?
Yes, that is a real challenge, Don, getting sustainable urban drainage into existing streets is one of the big challenges we face. And of course, it's not like a greenfield site where you can go out and you can map things out from the get-go with all the appropriate swales and traditional SUDS features. But those kind of things take up a lot of space. So I think, yes, more can be done to integrate water-sensitive urban design on London projects. And for our part, we see it as a challenge for us. We need to provide the creative solutions that can make that happen. And I think that is, again, is another opportunity to get good quality tree planting into London. And I'd cite as an example of this, a project we did at Goldhawk Road, which was quite, I suppose it was 3 or 4 years ago, but very interesting, where the local authority wanted to get trees into the street, but they wanted them to be multifunctional and part of a SUDS program. And so each tree they planted, they actually capped off one of the traditional gully pots, so that the water, instead of flowing into a gully pot, was flowing into the tree pit system. It's not quite as simple as that, but that's the gist of it. And that scheme has been incredibly successful. I went back there in one of the drought years after we had a really hot summer, because bear in mind, the trees in a SUDS situation, they have to cope with a lot of water for a short period of time. And then because they have to be designed to be very free draining, they need to survive through the summer as well. And I think we got the design right on those ones, because those trees are doing really, really well. It's another opportunity. SUDS is another opportunity to get more trees in. And of course, then you've got other solutions which we're bringing to the market, which are almost like a plug and play solution, Peter, where you can go to an existing situation and you can plug in a SUDS feature, a bit like our hydro planter. It's not exactly for trees, but it can help us bring nature into a city and provide a SUDS benefit. Where what we can do is make it simpler for the developers and landowners to incorporate these features effectively. So it is a challenge. Nobody's saying it isn't a challenge with the kind of environment we have in London, but definitely we can do more.
Well, tell me more about some of the bits of kit that you've got that can help deliver greener cities, sort of tree pits, soil cells, root management, green walls, etc.
Yeah, well, of course, over the years, since we started the business, the range has grown. Number of different solutions, nearly always they're led by what the market is asking for, or what the contractors, the people on the ground who are trying to do the hard stuff, they're saying, well, yeah, we need something to help us get trees in, or we need SUDS in. So what do we offer in the way of products and services? We try and offer the right from feasibility, really. We'll go to sites, work alongside with the designers, the highways engineers and so on, and look at a situation and say, well, how can we do this? Let's start from, we're going to get a tree in here, for example. How can we do this? And still be commercially viable. And that is a very important thing. So it's feasibility, then there's the designs, doing the designs to allow that, and then there's the actual products themselves. And what we've done over the years is we've built a composite system, which we called Arbor System. And it consists of the soil cells, the root directors, tree grills, the whole package. So as the tree establishes in the urban area, what the root directors do is guide the roots away from the surface so that you don't get these root trip hazards happening. And having done that, it guides the roots down and into a structural zone, which keeps the highways engineers happy, but it also looks after the soil. So if you think about a tree in a forest has access to huge volumes of uncompacted, good quality, free draining soil with plenty of nutrient and so on. What the soil cell system does is look after that. So we've developed a system called Root Space, which is part of the Arbor System package. And that provides that protected environment to allow the roots to grow and establish and allow subsequent persons coming along to maintain that tree pit to look after it. There's water and air vents in the surface, allowing water and air down to that root zone. It's all about looking at the tree in a forest situation and say, how can we recreate those forest conditions, but in this urban environment? And how can we do it in such a way that we keep the highways engineers happy, the architects, all the people who have to do with the structure? They're going to be fully confident that that is going to look after their expensive built infrastructure, but also provide for a tree. So it's those kind of products, if you like, broadly speaking, the root management, soil cell structures, and then the water sensitive urban design products such as hydroplanter. Then you've got a lot of peripheral smaller products like underground guying to keep the tree supported. You've also alluded to green wall systems, and we do a climbing wire, stainless steel climbing wire system to allow people to grow plants up walls and green up facades. So that is the kind of product system that we do. It's a suite of products to enable the green and blue, if you like, into the urban environment. And we're hearing quite a bit of this slogan, build back better. And I've kind of developed my own take on that. We do that by build in green. And by that, I mean, it's not just a cosmetic add-on. It's been thought of early in the process, and we can work with developers and contractors and architects and engineers to make that happen in an affordable, sustainable way. And talking about sustainability, that is one of the big drives we have to make the tree pit systems more sustainable. We use recycled plastic materials wherever we can and so on. So that's a big piece of this as well, Peter.
Well, thank you very much, Dean, for your insights, because it's really important that we have greener and healthier cities, particularly as we come out of the pandemic. So thank you very much.
That's good. No, you're welcome. Good to speak to you.